Hey everyone, welcome back. Today, I've got an absolutely jaw-dropping story for you. Trust. That's one thing I thought we had rock solid in our marriage. But hey, life loves a good curveball, doesn't it? It was just another Thursday, or so I thought, rummaging through drawers for my charger. Then I found her phone, buzzing with notifications, not usually a big deal, right? Except this time, it was. I wish I could say I didn't snoop, but those messages, they were like a car crash you can't look away from. Text from AP, my assistant, no less. Stuff that would make a sailor blush. My gut twisted into knots. This wasn't just some flirty office banter. It was full-blown betrayal. So, I confronted her. Laid it all out. Her face went ghost white, then red hot. Denial. Accusations. The whole 9 yards. I was paranoid, delusional. But the evidence was glaring. Right there in pixels and bytes. She kept denying, though, like if she said it enough, it might come true. I wasn't going to let this slide. I needed the truth, concrete and undeniable. Enter my pie. A guy who looked like he stepped out of a noir film. He got to work, tailing, taking snaps, the whole shebang. Meanwhile, I turned our home into my personal surveillance state. Cameras hidden in the most unassuming places. It felt wrong, but what choice did I have? Days passed. A weird mix of normalcy and espionage. Then, the pie hit the jackpot. Videos. Man, not just texts, but actual, irrefutable proof of her and AP together. Watching it felt like a punch to the gut, each frame a betrayal. That night, I sat in our living room, the evidence laid out on the coffee table like some twisted exhibit. The truth was right there, undeniable. My next move was clear, but man, was it going to be a doozy. Never thought I'd be the guy serving cold, hard truth with the appetizers. But here I was, at our meticulously planned dinner party, where I'd unveil my wife's betrayal. Our closest friends and family, all gathered around, clueless about the storm brewing. I clinked my glass, signaling for silence. I've got a surprise, I announced, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside. The screen lit up, showing texts, emails, and, the grand finale, video evidence of my wife's affair with my assistant. Gasps echoed around the room. I watched their faces, a mix of shock and disbelief. My wife's face was a canvas of horror and denial. This is a misunderstanding, she stammered. But her words fell flat in the heavy air of betrayal. I didn't bask in the drama. Instead, I moved to the next act of my plan. Filing for divorce seemed like a natural step, but it was more strategic than emotional. I cited her affair as the reason, knowing it would influence the proceedings in my favor. My lawyer was a shark, and I was ready to let him loose. But the real blow was the asset freeze. I had our accounts and assets legally frozen, leaving her financially stranded. The look on her face when she realized the extent of her predicament was something I thought would bring me satisfaction. Instead, it was a hollow victory. In a desperate attempt, she pleaded for forgiveness, promising it was a mistake. I never meant for this to happen, she cried, tears streaming down her face. But her pleas fell on deaf ears. I was done being the understanding husband. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming my life. As the chapter closes, I'm left with a mix of emotions. There's a sense of justice, sure, but also a profound sense of loss. I had loved her, after all, but that love was buried under layers of betrayal and deceit. The path ahead was clear, but it was a path I'd walk alone. You know, they say life's a roller coaster, but mine? It's more like a thriller movie, the kind that leaves you on the edge of your seat, heart pounding. It all started when a my right-hand man at work, vanished into thin air. Just like that, poof, gone. This was the guy who'd been warming my seat at home while I was out busting my chops. I should have been relieved, but his disappearance only thickened the plot. That's when the gears in my head started turning. If life wanted to play games, I was game. It was time for a little payback. A carefully orchestrated plan to teach my dear wife a lesson she wouldn't forget. The first move? A social media crusade. Nothing too dramatic, just a few well-placed posts to give people a glimpse of her true colors. The reactions were instant. A mix of shock, outrage, and for some, a bit of, I knew it. The fallout was like a line of dominoes. First, her job. She called me, tears and all, saying she got the boot. Scandal, they called it. I almost felt a pang of something. But no, this was the bed she made. Then came the cold shoulder from friends, family, the whole entourage. She was like a pariah, and I was the puppet master, pulling the strings from behind the curtain. I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy it. watching her world crumble piece by piece. But there was this nagging voice in the back of my head, wondering if I'd gone too far. I shook it off. This was justice, right? Payback for all the lies, the deceit. I was the victim here, taking back control. As her world shrank, mine expanded. I was in the driver's seat, steering this narrative where I wanted it to go. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just about revenge. It was a show, a spectacle, and I was both the director and the lead actor. A part of me wondered, when the final curtain fell, what would be left of the stage we'd both played on. If someone had told me my life would turn into a twisted game of chess, I'd have laughed. But here I was, in the thick of it. It started with my wife, desperate and penniless, her accounts frozen solid by my doing. She was scrambling for pennies, a far cry from the life of luxury she was accustomed to. Watching her struggle stirred something in me, but my resolve was firm. This was her doing, her consequences to bear. Then came the eviction notice. I owned the house, and she had no legal claim to it. The notice was just a piece of paper, but it might as well have been a dagger. It felt like the final nail in the coffin of our shared life. She pleaded, cried, but I was deft at it. This was retribution, plain and simple. That life, oh, it loves its curveballs. Just when I thought I had the upper hand, a mysterious package landed on my doorstep. Inside, evidence that turned my world upside down. AP, the man I thought was just a cheating scoundrel, was actually a pawn in a larger game. He was targeting me, not just personally, but professionally, a hired gun by a rival business. It was like watching a thriller unfold, except I was the protagonist. My wife, as it turned out, was just a means to an end, a tool in their elaborate scheme to take me down. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. She was used, manipulated, just as I had been. This revelation threw me into a tailspin. The anger and thirst for revenge I'd been nursing was now mixed with a strange cocktail of guilt and confusion. Had I been too harsh? Was this really justice, or just another layer of the game? As my wife fought tooth and nail against the eviction and the asset freeze, I found myself in a moral quagmire. Part of me wanted to let her drown in the mess she'd helped create, but another part, a part I tried to silence, wondered if I was any better than those who'd set this chain of events in motion. Her legal battles were futile, her resources a mere fraction of what she once had access to. It was a losing fight, and we both knew it. But as I watched her struggle, a new battle raged within me. A battle between the man I'd become in this saga of revenge and the man I once was, before betrayal, before vengeance, before this all-consuming game had begun. This chapter of my life, it wasn't just about settling scores anymore. It was about unearthing truths, about understanding the real enemy, and perhaps about confronting the demons within. Ever had one of those moments where everything feels like it's spinning out of control? That's where I found myself, right in the middle of my grand plan for revenge. It started off as a simple idea, a public event, the kind that would put my wife's dirty laundry out for everyone to see. I set the stage perfectly, ensuring every eye in the community would be on us. The night kicked off without a hitch. There she was, my soon-to-be ex-wife, clueless about what was about to hit her. The room was buzzing, and then I dropped the bomb. The evidence of her affair splashed across a giant screen. The gasps, the whispers, it was like music to my ears. But then, things took a turn. A couple of her die-hard friends, or what she had left of them, jumped to her defense. Words were thrown, tempers flared, and before I knew it, a full-blown physical altercation erupted. It was chaos, a whirlwind of shouting and shoving, and there I was, in the eye of the storm, feeling a rush I couldn't explain. But then, the unexpected happened. In the midst of all this madness, my wife collapsed. Stress, isolation, the whole scandal, it was too much for her. You'd think that would have been a wake-up call for me, right? A moment to step back and rethink this vendetta. But no, I was too far gone. My heart had turned to stone. I watched as she was rushed to the hospital, and I felt nothing. Just when I thought things couldn't get more twisted, enter the mysterious benefactor. Out of nowhere, someone started throwing support her way, pulling her out of the financial abyss I'd tossed her into. It was infuriating. Who was this person undermining my carefully laid plans? This chapter of our lives was like a game of chess, with moves and countermoves, but I was starting to lose track of who was playing who. There I was, thinking I was the puppet master, but with every twist and turn, I was left wondering who really had the control. Life has a funny way of throwing curveballs, doesn't it? Just when you think you've got it all figured out, boom, you're hit with a revelation that turns everything on its head. That's exactly what happened to me. I was deep in my quest for revenge when I decided to dig a little deeper into AP, the man who turned my life into a living soap opera. I started digging into AP's past, and let me tell you, it was like peeling back layers of an onion. Each layer revealed something more rotten than the last. Turns out, this guy was a pro at playing people, a real-life puppet master. He'd been manipulating relationships for personal gain his whole career. Knowing this added a whole new flavor to the betrayal. It wasn't just a fling, it was a calculated move. Meanwhile, my wife, in a desperate attempt to salvage whatever dignity she had left, made a public apology. It was broadcasted for all to see, a display of remorse, or so it seemed. Part of me wondered if there was any sincerity in her words, if she truly regretted the pain she caused. But by then, my heart had hardened. I couldn't see past my own hurt and anger. So, I did what any self-respecting, scorned husband would do. I rejected her apology, and not just privately. I made sure everyone knew that her words meant nothing to me. This rejection, it was like the final nail in the coffin for her. I watched, almost detached, as she spiraled further down. Her life, once so full of charm and grace, was now in ruins. The vibrant woman I once knew was no more. In her place stood a broken shadow, a reminder of the damage caused by betrayal and revenge. It's strange, being in this position. Part of me relished in her downfall, felt a sense of justice being served. But another part, a quieter, more reflective part, wondered if this was really victory. Watching her descent, I couldn't help but question what I'd become in this quest for retribution. Was I really the hero of this story? Or had I turned into something else, something darker? Who would have thought, right? After all the chaos, the lies, the heartache, the man who started it all, my assistant, AP, just waltzes back into the picture. He shows up out of the blue, oozing charm and deceit, offering my wife a deal straight out of a spy movie. The nerve of this guy, he wanted her to betray me, to hand over sensitive company information in exchange for a fat stack of cash. As I watched from a distance, I could see the conflict in her eyes. She was cornered, desperate, her life a tattered mess because of the games we'd all been playing. I could tell part of her was considering it, weighing the option of one last betrayal for a chance to escape this nightmare. But then, something unexpected happened. She said no. After everything, after the lies, the affair, the public humiliation, she drew a line. She refused to sink further, to betray me again. It was a moment of clarity, a flicker of the woman I once knew, the one I thought I'd lost forever to greed and deception. That's when AP showed his true colors. The guy wasn't just a cheat, he was dangerous. He threatened to hurt me, to take me out of the picture if she didn't comply. The stakes were suddenly higher than any of us had anticipated. And then, another twist. My wife, the woman I'd vilified, the one I'd pushed to the brink, came to me with a warning. She told me everything. AP's return, his offer, his threat. It was a surreal moment, standing there, listening to her, realizing that despite the venomous path our lives had taken, there was still a shred of concern, of care. It was a chapter straight out of a thriller, with betrayals, threats, and unexpected alliances. The lines between right and wrong, between revenge and justice, they were all blurred. Here we were, in the middle of a game that had spiraled out of control. A game where the only winning move was not to play. But the question remained, were we too far gone to back out now? Life's funny, One moment you're on top of the world, the next, you're setting a trap for the guy who tried to ruin your life. That's where I found myself after my wife's bombshell warning about AP's comeback and his devious plans. I was burning with a mix of anger and a strange sense of gratitude. There she was, trying to save me from the mess she helped create. Irony at its finest. Huh? So, I hatched a plan, a real cunning one. I used the info she gave me, turned the tables on AP. It was like setting up a chessboard, every piece moving exactly as I wanted. And man, did it work. AP walked right into the trap, thinking he was the hunter when he was actually the prey. The look on his face when the cops slapped those cuffs on him was priceless. All his schemes, his manipulations, they crumbled to dust right there. But here's the kicker, even with AP out of the picture, things between me and my wife were too far gone. There was no fairy tale ending, no tearful reconciliation. The betrayal, the lies, they were too deep, the wounds too raw. We were past the point of no return. And it didn't end there for her. With AP's arrest, all sorts of skeletons came tumbling out of the closet. She got tangled up in the legal mess, facing charges for her part in the whole debacle. It was a hard fall from grace, and I didn't lift a finger to break her fall. Then came the divorce settlement. Let's just say the prenup was a lifesaver. I walked away with everything, leaving her with nothing but memories and regrets. I know it sounds harsh, but hey, actions have consequences, right? The final blow? She ended up homeless. Yeah, you heard that right. From living in luxury to having nowhere to call home. Her life, once so full of promise and laughter, now a shadow of its former self. As I close this chapter, I can't help but wonder, was it worth it? The revenge, the satisfaction of seeing her life crumble, did it really make up for the betrayal? I guess some questions don't have easy answers. All I know is, life goes on, and so do I, in a world that's a little less bright, a little less kind. Life's a funny thing, you know? Just when you think you've got it all figured out, it throws you a curveball that knocks you off your feet. That's where I found myself, in the aftermath of it all. Rebuilding my life, focusing on my business, trying to find some semblance of normalcy in the chaos that had become my existence. The community, well, they were split right down the middle. Some looked at me as a hero, a man who stood up for himself. Others, they pitted her, the woman who lost everything. You could feel the tension, the whispers, the judgments. It was like living in a fishbowl, every move scrutinized, every decision judged. Then came my wife's regret. It was like a floodgate had opened, apologies and pleas for forgiveness pouring out. But it was too late. The bridge was burned, the damage done. I couldn't find it in me to forgive, to forget. I was moving on, or at least trying to. But life, oh, it had other plans. Enter the plot twist. A long-lost friend of mine reappears out of the blue. And guess what? He was the mysterious benefactor helping my wife all this time. Talk about a stab in the back. Here I was, thinking I knew my friends, my enemies. But the lines, they were all blurred. He believed in second chances, redemption, all that jazz. But me? I felt betrayed, tricked. It was a rift that couldn't be mended, a friendship lost in the crossfire of my vendetta. And just when I thought I'd seen it all, my wife, beaten down by life, makes one final plea. Not for love, not for reconciliation, but for survival. She was at rock bottom, and even then, I couldn't bring myself to lend a hand. It was a decision that weighed on me, a reminder of the cost of revenge. This chapter of my life was a crossroads, a test of character and loyalty. What do you do when the lines between right and wrong are blurred? How do you choose between self-preservation and compassion? These were the questions that haunted me as I stood at the precipice of a new life, forever changed by the events that had unfolded. If you told me a year ago that my life would turn out like this, I would have laughed you out of the room. But here I am, staring at the ruins of everything I once held dear. It all came crashing down, starting with me slamming the door shut on my wife's final plea. There was no going back, no more chances. I was determined to close this chapter of my life, no matter the cost. My wife, left with nothing, surprised me though. She found this resilience, this will to survive despite being at rock bottom. Watching from afar, I saw her grappling with new challenges, legal battles, health issues, the whole 9 yards. It was like she was clawing her way out of a hole, determined not to let the darkness consume her. But, as I sat in my tower of solitude, the winds began to shift. The community, which once had my back, started to turn. Whispers of my ruthlessness, my cold-hearted revenge, began to spread. Friends became strangers, and strangers became critics. My reputation, once my most prized possession, was now tarnished. Then, the unthinkable happened. My empire, my business, which I had sacrificed so much to protect and grow, began to crumble. It was a slow, painful process, like watching a house of cards collapse in slow motion. I had been so focused on my vendetta, so consumed by my need for retribution, that I had neglected the very foundation of my success. In the end, it wasn't just my wife who lost everything. I stood amidst the wreckage of my own making, realizing the heavy price of my vengeance. My once flourishing business was now a shadow of its former self. My personal life a barren wasteland of broken relationships and lost connections. As the chapter closed on this tumultuous saga, I couldn't help but reflect on the irony of it all. In my quest to punish my wife, to make her pay for her betrayal, I had lost everything. My story, which began as a quest for justice, ended as a cautionary tale about the destructive power of revenge. There was no peace, no satisfaction, just the hollow emptiness of a man who had let his thirst for vengeance consume him. Stick around until the end to see how everything unfolded, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more intense stories. Welcome back to the channel. Hope everyone is having a wonderful day or evening. In today's story, Opie found out his wife cheated on him with his gym trainer after he showed up to her work and saw them. He then followed AP home and told his wife about it. Now, Opie's wife and AP are a complete wreck after what Opie and AP's wife did to get revenge. Now, let's get into today's story to find out what happened. I was 22 years old when I decided to join a gym and build some muscle. It was there that I met my future ex-wife and trainer, who was 25 years old. She was amazingly fit. Whenever I worked out, she became my motivation. She'd joke with me, laugh, and ask me questions about my job and hobbies. I gained muscle under her watch and eventually asked her on a date. Throughout our dating relationship, she never shared anything about herself that I didn't instantly fall in love with. When my dad met her, he insisted that I pop the question. Looking back now, I know it was too soon. I think Dad and I were just excited at the thought of expanding our small family. We had a big wedding. My dad spared no expense. A few years later, we still didn't have a baby, but things seemed to be going fine. She was still a trainer at the gym and I'd moved up in my dad's company. We spent lots of time together because we got home from work at the same time each day. We were open about our cell phones, but I never asked to check hers. I never felt like I needed to until 5 years later. My dad passed away, so I was basically running his business. I started getting home a little later, around 5 p.m., and I'd find her at home being a wonderful housewife and making dinner or something. Well, after a few months of this, she arrived home after me one night. This was odd because she never worked late or did anything without sending me a text. When I asked her where she'd been, she was surprised I didn't get her text. She showed me how she typed out a text to me, but didn't push send. The text said that she was going to give a coworker a ride home because his car wouldn't start. This was just a red flag to me, and I knew something was up. She started taking her phone into the bathroom with her, and this was the second red flag. We never made a rule for this, but she'd never done it because she wanted to be in and out quickly. I waited a minute before I walked in on her, trying to see what was on her phone. She was definitely texting someone before she jumped out of her skin and looked like she was caught red-handed. After a verbal fight ensued, I was finally able to check her phone. It was a string of texts to a number that wasn't saved. It appeared that some of the texts were missing because the conversation didn't make sense. Only innocent enough sounding texts were left behind without context. The whole time I checked her phone, she was bright red. I asked for more information, but she swore it was the same friend who needed a ride home, and that nothing was going on. I pretended to let it go, but secretly decided to follow her to work the next day. I saw a male coworker greet her with a smile and hug. I returned later as they were getting off work and saw him give her another hug. My blood was boiling. Who was this guy, and why was it so normal for him to touch my wife? They chatted about God knows what, until I texted her to say I'd be home late. She looked at the text with him standing beside her, and then leaned close to tell him something. They both walked to his car, got in, and left. I followed them to his house and sat in my car for a few minutes. Before I get out of the car, a woman knocks on my window. She demands to know who I am and why I'm outside of her house. Although I was very confused, I told her what was going on. As she listened, a look of concern spread across her face. She said that she'd been suspecting her husband of cheating with a coworker and thought he was bringing her here while she worked late. Tonight, she came home early without informing him, and that's when she saw my car. She invited me to join her while she knocked on the door. We held our breath until her husband answered the door. He turned white, and I could see beads of sweat appear on his forehead. He starts playing dumb and asking what's going on right before his wife explodes on him. Her screams urge my wife to rush to the door, adjusting her clothes as she makes eye contact with me. She immediately starts fighting back tears as she explains that she just wanted to come over and hang out with him, something that makes no sense and has no credibility at all. While the wife screams at her husband, I notice my wife's wedding ring is missing from her finger. I demand that she gets in my car, and she does. On the way to pick up her car, she would not admit that they had sex. I was trembling as I drove. My wife never showed me any signs of wanting something different from what we had. I asked her why she slept with him, but she denied it again. She said they were only supposed to hang out, and that she didn't know he was married either. When I asked her why her wedding ring was off, she told me it was because it pinched whenever she lifted weights. I didn't believe her, but I didn't make her leave the house either. A part of me wanted this to be a bad dream. She didn't go back to work, and for about 2 months, she lived each day in suspense and humility while she did her best to please me. I basically ignored her and all the questions my brain wanted answers to. Like, was she still secretly talking to this man? Why won't she admit she had sex when I know she did? Does she even want to be married? How could I ever trust her again? That's when I got an email from that man's wife. My email isn't hard to find if you know my name. She told me that her husband finally told her what happened, that my wife had been to their house at least 2 times before that, and that each time, she had sex with her husband. She added that she was sorry to be the bearer of bad news, and that she planned on informing their boss of the affair. It was the worst news of my life. Instead of talking to me about whatever was going through her head and trying to keep our marriage sacred, she went behind my back and slept with him. The level of betrayal was unspeakable. I confronted her, calling her a liar and showing her the email I received. She started crying and begging me to forgive her. She said that they had chemistry at work, and the thought of sleeping with him just crossed her mind. She said it was a mistake to go through with it, and that she's hated herself ever since it happened. I told her I didn't believe a damn word she said, because apparently, she had gone back to his house more than once to sleep with him. It takes an awful lot of deceit and intent to keep going back like that. She cheated on me more than once with some guy she knew for about a month. I told her how upset I was that she never tried to talk to me about any of it while pretending she had no secrets from me. Because of her infidelity and lies, I filed for divorce. My dad raised me to be emotionally strong and to make decisions that need to be made. I'm almost glad he died before she did this, so that according to him, we lived happily ever after. But no. Instead of that, her affair and bad reputation became the hot gossip of our small town. The dude was kicked out by his wife around the same time I kicked out my ex. They were both fired, divorced at a young age, and labeled as cheaters. I heard he won't date her because he doesn't trust her. Go figure. A few weeks later, I took the betrayed wife out for dinner, and we had a good time. OP, I am very sorry your wife was unfaithful to you. People make mistakes, but when it comes to this level of betrayal, it's hard to recover from it. As long as you try to stay with her, you probably second-guess everything she said and never truly feel comfortable in the relationship. Marriage requires hard work and honesty, both of which seem far-fetched to that woman. She went back more than once to commit the same sin against you, and was only remorseful after she was caught. This type of woman is not mature enough or ready for marriage, and sometimes it's a lesson learned too late. I am happy for you that you made the quick and accurate decision to get divorced. It can be difficult for people to make this decision, although it is often the better option when it comes to infidelity. Keep yourself number one in your life until you find someone who becomes just as important. Now let's get into today's second story. My ex and I have attended the same church since we were kids. Well, not anymore, and you'll understand at the end. We started dating each other when she was 20 and I was 21. Our parents were both strict in our religion and expected us to abstain from sex until marriage. We agreed at first, but it became quite a challenge, and we did it a few times. Around the time I proposed, we began attending separate Bible study groups for men and women. Each group would discuss things like how important it was to keep yourself pure until marriage under God, what was expected of a Christian wife or husband, and stuff like that. These groups met at the same time once a week, and I would drive my fans home afterward. One night, I waited an extra 10 minutes for her to come out of the church. It wasn't too odd to me, and I didn't ask anything. She seemed happy and fine. The next week, I waited 15 minutes. This time, I asked what held her up. She said she likes talking to one of the leaders after the lesson to get a better understanding of it. I didn't want to push any further, so I let it go. The next week, as I'm waiting for her to come out of the church, one of the women from her group knocked on my window. She says she wants to let me know that my fiancé has been staying later to talk to a man that helps out with sound tech during their meetings. This really took me by surprise. She was staying later to talk to another man. I'd been under the impression only women were allowed in the group, including staff. When my fiancé finally got back to the car, I asked her about it. She got defensive and asked why it's a big deal for her to talk to a church leader about Bible lessons. I clarified that this man doesn't participate in the women's group. He's only there as a technical assistant. Then I asked why she was talking to him about the lessons of such a personal journey. She just shrugged and said she didn't think anyone from the church was off limits for Bible discussions. I asked her to stop talking to him altogether, and she agreed to stop so that I wouldn't worry. The next week, I was waiting for her to get back to the car when I got a text from her that said she'd already gotten a ride home from a girl in the group. This really upset me. The church doors only opened from the inside this late at night. I tried calling her several times, but she didn't answer. As a woman was walking back to her car, I asked her if she happened to see my finance inside. She said no, the room was empty. I drove to her house and knocked on the door. No one answered. I assumed it was because they were sleeping and I didn't have a key. I decided to give up for the night and had faith that the truth would soon be revealed. On Sunday morning after the service, a church leader waited until my fiancé went into the bathroom to pull me aside and tell me some concerning news. We went into a little security room with some other church staff and lots of screens. They directed my attention to one screen and apologized for having to show me this. In the video, my fiancé can be seen with the tech man going into a room alone. They emerge later looking pleased. I asked if they have video footage of the room they went into, and they say yes, but that I wouldn't want to see that. The man in question was most definitely not aware there was a camera in that room as well. I'm sure my face was bright red at this point. I hated her for embarrassing me like this. I still do a little bit. Someone left the security room to retrieve my fiancé and the man in question. Funny coincidence that they were chatting with each other when he found them. As soon as they enter the room, they know this is bad. The guy tries to leave immediately, but he's stopped by the pastor of the church. He says that we need to discuss this and the repercussions that will follow. After the clip of them going in the room played, my fiancé's tears started flowing and she told me she was sorry. I told her that we were over and got her engagement ring back. She loudly sobbed while the pastor told the guy he's fired and may have charges pressed against him. He then left the room and I followed him, brushing past my ex. I followed him outside and heavily considered fighting him, but I didn't feel like I needed to. My fiancé caught up to me and started begging for forgiveness. I told her that she has ultimately shamed herself, her faith, and me. There's no way she can recover my trust, and it would be much easier for me to just move on and start over new. For the next few weeks at church, everyone was talking about her, him, and their shame. They didn't attend the church anymore. Everyone stole glances at me as I walked by, and only a few people attempted to console me about it. It didn't take long for me to decide I needed a new church. My ex lost all credibility with the people she held closest to her. I can only hope to find a good wife that holds the same values I do. Wow. That is a very difficult thing to go through. It sounds like your ex and that guy got the shame and disgrace that they deserved. It just pains me that you were outcast as well. You had your heart in a good place, attempting to do things properly when she decided to take advantage of you. The good news is that, like you expected, the truth did come out, and you have an opportunity to marry a woman that deserves your loyalty and dedication. Even if it feels like the world around you is falling apart, there is hope. Hope is stubborn and doesn't give up on us. As long as we are true to ourselves and practice self-love, we are on the right path. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened in both stories. Hey everyone, welcome back. Today, I have an unbelievable and intense story to share with you. I am 36 years old and my wife is 38. We first met when I was in my third year of college and she was in her fourth. We've been together since that day. After 3 years of dating, we decided to move in together. 3 more years passed and we got married. 2 years later, our joy increased when my wife became pregnant and we welcomed the birth of our daughter. As in any normal family, we had a fair share of domestic quarrels, but we always managed to make up quickly, sometimes even in the midst of a quarrel. Overall, we were a classic family. After finishing my education, I started my career path by working hard to climb the corporate ladder. In the end, I earned enough to afford a spacious 4-room apartment. We invested in a major renovation and happily settled in our new apartment. My wife also resumed her career after maternity leave, and everything went well for her. She got a good position and started earning a decent income. By combining our income, we were financially prosperous. Over time, we acquired everything we needed: a new apartment for our growing daughter, expensive cars, and all the amenities that one could wish for. Life seemed abundant. I deeply loved my wife and remained faithful to her throughout our marriage. I was not a heavy drinker, but sometimes I allow myself to drink a glass of wine at dinner. Smoking was a habit I recently gave up. We always planned our holidays together, and I developed a passion for diving and skiing. While my wife decided not to dive out of fear, she learned to ski. Our life revolved around work, earning money, and enjoying the fruits of our labor. My wife's work was connected with international business, which often required her to receive colleagues from abroad for negotiations. Gradually, I began to notice that her communication with these colleagues seemed to last longer than before. Although it seemed curious to me, at first, I didn't pay much attention to it. Another notable change was that she started receiving Snapchat messages in the evenings. Strangely, whenever her foreign colleagues were around, these messages stopped coming. I checked her phone a couple of times after she fell asleep, but all the messages were deleted. I noticed that the last message was always around 7 p.m., despite the fact that the phone received notifications after she had already gone to bed. In the end, suspicion consumed me completely. One day, she came home late around 10 p.m. and I, foolishly, jokingly asked if she had said goodbye to her lover. The fear that flashed in her eyes was something I had never seen before. However, as soon as she realized that I was teasing her, she smiled and brushed it off, calling me a fool. Moreover, she sometimes went abroad to visit her colleagues in return. When my suspicions reached a peak, I couldn't take it anymore. I resorted to installing a spyware on her phone, which allowed me to control it remotely via SMS or from my personal account. This program could record the audio of the environment, take photos with the camera, and send all the data to my personal account. One day, she went on another business trip, and in the evening, I came home from work. I spent time with our daughter, helped her with her homework, and put her to bed by 10 p.m. As soon as she fell asleep, I gained access to the spyware account and ordered it to record her phone's surrounding sound for 10 minutes. After a few minutes, a recording appeared on my account, and after listening to it, I heard my wife's voice in the room with a man. They spoke English and I understood every word. They discussed the mundane aspects of life and laughed. I realized that they were alone in the room. Suddenly, I heard the clink of glasses and their laughter. At that moment, my heart started pounding wildly. I sent another command to record for an additional 20 minutes and take a picture of the environment. To my horror, the photo turned out to be a black square indicating that the phone was placed with the camera down. I quickly instructed the program to take a picture using the front camera. The resulting photo showed the phone lying on the bedside table in the room, a part of the headboard of the bed, and a wall lamp standing next to it. 15 minutes later, another recording appeared that made me shiver. I played the tape back and heard them laughing and talking again. I found myself in a state of disbelief and shock if my whole world was collapsing before my eyes. Stunned, I poured myself a drink and ordered the program to record for 4 hours, after which I drowned my sorrows in alcohol. The next morning, Thursday, I was completely shattered. Since it was time for my daughter to go to school, I told her that she was not required to attend classes that day. I notified my boss that I would take a couple of personal days until Monday. My wife was supposed to return on Sunday. Then I sat down and started listening to the 4-hour recording. However, I only managed to listen for 40 minutes because it was at that moment that I heard the unmistakable sounds of my wife's pleasure, the same sounds that I had known well for more than 13 years. It felt like a knife was stabbed into my heart, causing both emotional and physical pain. Stunned, I rushed to the bathroom and threw up, unable to figure out if it was from a hangover or from the current situation. I stood under an icy shower for 20 minutes, desperately looking for some relief. After that, I took her daughter to visit her grandparents, assuring her that I would explain everything later and return home alone. My wife called during lunch and sincerely asked how I was doing. I stood there in silence, unable to say a word, pretending that the connection was bad. I told her that I was unwell and would stay at home for a couple of days, and that I entrusted our daughter to the care of her grandmother. That day was the most painful in my life. I witnessed a personal hell, feeling completely lost and unsure of what to do. My head was filled with an incessant buzzing that drowned out my own thoughts. I sat on the couch and cried like a child as waves of anger and apathy overwhelmed me. The more I expressed my emotions, the more they dulled in me. By the end of the day, I was emotionally exhausted. In the evening, I returned to the spyware account and started issuing commands to the phone. I got the photos. Some were taken from her bag and others from the table. There were recordings of her performances in restaurants with numerous voices, obviously her colleagues. Then in the course of the evening, I came across something. The phone was again on the bedside table, recording her voice along with someone else's. However, this time, there were no intimate sounds. Unable to take it anymore, I called her. After 4 rings, she answered, noticeably out of breath. I asked her about her heavy breathing, to which she replied that the hotel elevator had failed, and she had to climb the stairs to her room. I talked to her for a while, trying my best to keep my voice calm and even. I had announced my intention to go to bed, wished her good night, hung up the phone, and quickly sent a command to the spy program, requesting a quick series of pictures with the front camera. That's when she made a mistake. After our call, she put the phone not on the bedside table, but on the bed next to her. Consequently, the front-facing camera started sending slightly tilted, but candid photos. Images of her sitting astride another person with her head thrown back. This was followed by a recording that captured those unmistakable sounds that any husband would recognize, instantly revealing her actions. That was the last straw for me. I kept these notes and materials. Although at that moment, she was already a complete stranger to me. From that moment on, I refrained from further investigations until Sunday because everything became painfully clear. I was considering my next steps. Should I seek a divorce? What about our 9-year-old daughter? On Sunday, late at night, she came home, eager to kiss me. I recoiled, reminding her that I was sick. I wanted to hit her to unleash my anger. Having retired to the office, I went asleep on the sofa. The next morning, I got up before her and went to work, unable to be around her anymore. I'd endured the day mechanically, then approached my boss and asked for an urgent week's vacation. I recorded all the evidence on a flash drive, and then I called my wife, telling her that I was going on a business trip for one day, but asked her not to take our daughter away from her grandmother, as I had a surprise in store for her. That evening, when I got home, I quickly packed my bag. She helped me pack my things, behaving politely and innocently. However, her hypocrisy only inflamed my rage. I grabbed my bag, put the USB stick on the bedside table in the bedroom, and called a taxi to our second apartment, the one that was reserved for our daughter. Once there, I called a friend and offered to go abroad for a few days for a while. He agreed, and we quickly booked tickets for an early morning flight to Munich. It was there that I revealed everything to him. We drank, wandered around the city, and socialized with other women. To be honest, I no longer felt any affection for my wife. I ignored her calls and only sent her a message instructing her to insert the USB stick into my laptop. After about half an hour, my phone continuously lit up with calls and messages, but I refrained from reading any of them. I just didn't care anymore, so I turned off my phone. We continued our adventures in Munich for 3 more days before I flew home on Saturday. When I got back, I turned on my phone and it took me 5 minutes to process a lot of messages sent by my wife. However, I decided not to read them for fear falling into confusion before entering the apartment. When I went inside, the atmosphere was eerily quiet. I silently put down my bag, took off my shoes, and was about to wash my hands when she came out of the bedroom. Oh my God. I've never seen her so disheveled and swollen with her face covered in tears. She fell to her knees, trying to explain something incoherently between sobs and slime. I kept a stony expression on my face, convincing her not to make a circus. Then, in a calm tone, I asked her what we were going to do next. She begged me to forgive. Again, tears snot. She said that she had played too much, that she did not understand how she had come to this. She started calling herself scum, etc. But I caught myself thinking that I no longer feel pity or rage for her. She screamed that she loved and had always loved only me, and all this happened only because she got stuffed and realized during all the days that I was gone that she had broken our crystal castle with her own hand. But as they say, revenge is a dish that should be served cold. I said that now we are not husband and wife. Now we are just mom and just dad for our daughter. And we will pretend that everything is fine with us, but I will live my life and you can live yours. You're not the only one for me anymore. You're just my partner in raising a child. Maybe someday I'll change my mind, but now I'm just sick of just the thought of intimacy with her. By the way, I told her where I was and what I was doing. She said that she understood everything and was ready to endure as long as it took. Well, no one pulled her tongue. As a result, now we live in the same apartment. Although honestly, I've already bought another one for myself and issued it to my father so that there would be no claims in case of property division. I sleep almost constantly in the office, although sometimes I go to sleep in the bedroom for the sake of my daughter. On the part of my wife, there were a couple of attempts to try to hug me when I lay down in the same bed with her, but I stopped them harshly. We haven't had intimacy for 3 months. She didn't tell her parents anything. Only her father knows of mine. We agreed that once a year we go on vacation as a family for a week, but now it would be separate beds. I'm constantly hanging out with friends and have new acquaintances among them. There are beautiful women. I sometimes think when she'll come up and say that she's had enough and she leaves or, for example, files for divorce and we divide the property, but she doesn't. I constantly catch her looking at me. Like the look of a shriek cat, but I honestly don't give a shit. Although I see that she is trying, but I revel in her pain. Recently, I defiantly put a pack of condoms on the desk in the office to look at. Despite her reaction, she came in to say something, saw them on the table, and flew out of the office like a bullet, probably crying, did not catch up. She still goes to work, but she really doesn't stay late. Although honestly, I don't follow practically. Somehow, she came up and tried to explain to me that she had broken off all relations with that man except business, and it seems like at work, she will still have to communicate with him by letters or in negotiations, but she swears that she does not even approach him now. By the way, this freak also has a family, to which I told her that her relationship with sexual partners does not concern me, and she is free to do what she wants. It is not necessary to report on whether she spread her legs today or not. I myself sometimes come back after midnight now, or vice versa. I leave when my daughter goes to bed from Friday to Saturday, for example. Naturally, I do not limit myself in anything. If I want sex, then it will definitely take place. I come in the morning and go to the office to sleep off, or to the bedroom if she is not there anymore. Nothing has changed in the home routine. I still buy groceries. I love and know how to cook. We had cleaning on the incoming housekeeper, so nothing has changed here. I have been paying for the apartment and I am still paying. Where she spends her money and whether she spends it, I do not care. Communication like loving each other is only for our daughter, or her parents if they come. Although it seems to me that if I tell my mother-in-law, she will probably strangle her right in front of my eyes. I have a great relationship with my mother-in-law. She is an intelligent woman and strictly respects family values. Surely, this is another argument why the wife does not want to leave. Apparently, she is afraid of her mother. Because mom will definitely ask the question what the hell is going on. And I am not going to lie. In general, I mock her as much as I can and I really enjoy it. Yes, maybe I have become a monster now, but she herself gave birth to that monster. And you know what amazes me? Her perseverance and patience. It's like a red flag to a bull for me. I wonder how much more she can take. And please don't start with the whole, she's the mother of your child, blah blah blah. What she was giving herself to that jerk, she didn't care much about that. For half a year, going on business trips or spreading her legs in this city without thinking about our daughter or her husband. No comment. Every time I feel like my armor will crack, I remember that day, what I felt back then, and it eases me. I become stone again. So this is how I live now. Everything is fine with our daughter. We are great parents, and I still help her with her lessons in the evenings. Our mutual friends know nothing. Maybe when I get tired of tormenting her or realize that enough is enough, I'll switch off the bastard mode and have a talk with her. But not now. Not now. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Until next time, I'll see you again. Hey everyone. Welcome back to the channel. All this time I was sure that our marriage was strong and reliable. I was ready to do everything to make our life happy and full of love. But one day I discovered that my wife was only using me as a means to her own ends. She had cheated on me, and it was not the first time. I realized that all along she had her own plan, and I was just a puppet in her hands. But I wasn't going to stay idle, and decided to get back at her for her betrayal. Matvey and Alina had known each other since high school. The boy had been in love with the first beauty of their school for many years, and once even worked up the courage to ask her out. But she sharply rejected him. She preferred to go out with a cocky high school student named Pasha. He seemed mature and very cool to her. Matvey sometimes heard other girls whispering behind his back, discussing his unrequited love. And Alina herself was with Pavel right up until graduation. After graduation, Matvey studied at university working in parallel, and after graduation began to rise by leaps and bounds on the career ladder. He managed to get a job at an international company. He began to earn a lot of money. He bought himself a spacious apartment and a nice car and helped his parents. He also liked to travel. The impressions of travel greatly energized him. One day, he was invited to another meeting of classmates. Matvey decided to go there for a change. It was there that his meeting with Alina took place many years later. When she saw Matvey, she could not even believe her eyes. The man, though clothed, was restrained, but she roughly understood the cost of all these things on him. They were talking. Alina questioned her former suitor with great interest about what he was living now. And by the minute she was getting more and more into some kind of relationship with him. They exchanged phone numbers, and the next day Alina was the first to call. Now after all these years, she herself made a date with Matvey. Over all these years, he had not lost his warm feelings for Alina. And although in the past she had rejected him and dated someone else, none of that mattered. Now they met as adults. And Matvey was glad that Alina was finally interested in him herself. Their relationship began very quickly. Alina knew what she wanted from this life. So the slow development of the novel did not interest her. Their wedding took place just 6 months later. Although Matvey's parents tried to tell him it was too soon, and it was still necessary to get to know each other better, they began to travel together. Matvey showed his wife various countries in their local colors. Alina watched everything with her mouth open and was as excited as a child. When they returned to their city, the woman began to take more and more of her work from Hula, explaining that she was not feeling well. At the same time, she often began to complain to her husband that she was very tired of working. Her bosses didn't appreciate her, and she felt that she was wasting her time there. These were no longer subtle hints, but real manipulations. And Matvey fell for it. He still could not rejoice that the love of his youth, now his lawful spouse. Of course, after all this talk, he himself suggested that she quit her job and rest at home. He would take care of everything. Alina's dream finally came true. She lives in her husband's luxurious apartment. He allows her not to work and does not deny her anything. They live like this for a few more years. And then her husband's business trip, which lasted several weeks, happened. He and his wife would call each other late at night, but sometimes she would miss a call, claiming that she was very tired from the day. When Matvey returned, it was as if the atmosphere in his home had changed. His wife did not welcome him with the same joy as usual. She acted rather reserved and even a little aloof, which really hurt the man. He thought she had something going on or was just in a bad mood, so he didn't emphasize it. Intuitively, he sensed that something was wrong, but he didn't give it much thought. During the next month that he was in town, his wife's being just as slightly different. She started spending more and more time with her girlfriends, sometimes returning home and even later than her husband. When Matvey asked her what she was doing all that time away from home, she said that her best friend was also out of work now, and they went to salons and sports centers together or just went for a walk. One day Matvey was supposed to have a business meeting at a restaurant in the center of town. On that day, things did not go well from the very morning. First, he left important documents at home, and on his way back to pick them up, he was late for work. Then some minor mishaps at the office threw him off balance, and now he was stuck in a traffic jam not far from that very restaurant. As he sat in his car, irritably texting his colleague that he might be late because of the traffic situation, his attention was caught by two silhouettes gliding outside the window. Matvey looked up and saw a couple. His wife was walking with some man and was hanging out with him interestedly. The husband's previously unknown feeling of jealousy pricked him. He could see for sure that it was his wife, and how she was enjoying herself in the company of another man. Interesting choice of girlfriends she has, of course, he thought irritatedly. The traffic was moving very slowly, and Matvey decided to follow where the two men were going. They were going straight to the restaurant where Matvey himself was headed. After about 10 minutes, all the cars parted, and the man was able to turn around and park beside the place. He went in very carefully, looking around to see where his wife was sitting, but at the same time not to get caught. He was lucky. The table at which his meeting was taking place was at a decent distance from the table where Alina was sitting with her companion. While this colleague was talking to his partners, Matvey was watching his wife without blinking. At last he could make out who she was with. The face seemed painfully familiar, but the man had to strain his memory hard to figure out who it was. With horror to himself, he recognized in her companion, Paul, the same one Alina had dated back in high school. With each passing minute, his faith in the best was evaporating faster and faster. Alina openly flirted with Pasha, and at one point he began stroking her thigh. Matvey desperately wanted to take out the anger that was boiling inside of him on these two, but he was held hostage to the situation. The meeting was very important. He could not lose face. As a result, the man thought, since these two were acting this way, their relationship had not lasted the first day. Yes, he was hurt because of this infidelity. He was ready to tear up and throw up, but he understood that these emotions would not make things better. He could deal with the unfaithful spouse later, but now he had better things to do. He concentrated on the negotiations and held them to the highest standard. Alina and her lover left before he did. It was obvious they were in a hurry to finally get some privacy. Afterwards, Matvey drove home. He threw all of Alina's belongings into bags and took them to the nearest garbage can. When the trader returned home, she was extremely surprised. The door was locked from the inside with a latch. Then her husband opened it. He said that now she no longer lived here, and if she had time, she could still fight the local bums at the dump for her clothes. The woman first thought her husband was joking, but when the door slammed in her face, she realized that he had found out. The couple divorced. Matvey was even glad that his mother had insisted on a prenuptial agreement before the wedding. It turned out to be very convenient. Alina never once apologized to Matvey for her betrayal. Nothing bad happened for her. She simply acted out of self-interest. For a long time after school, she was constantly on and off with Pavel because he could not provide her with everything. But when she found out that Pavel's financial situation had improved, she was the first to make contact. In fact, he was the only one she really loved. But his plight a few years ago prevented her from staying with him. She met Matthew and realized that he could give her the life she wanted. Now she began to live with Pavel again. Matvey understood that Alina would forever be the one who would be constantly on the lookout for a better place. She would change her partners an endless number of times without sticking with anyone for long. Instead of building a future with her husband, helping him and reaching for the heights together, she has chosen to live a parasitic lifestyle. But life is complicated, and staying on the crest of success all the time won't work. Black bars happen to everyone. So the claim that Paul was lucky to stay with such a woman together was highly questionable. She would stay with him, but only until his first bad luck. Second story. I might never have known the truth about my wife. But when my friends suddenly showed up with the words, I need to tell you something about your wife. I felt something was wrong. I couldn't even think what he was going to say. But what followed was so amazing that I didn't know what to do next. It turned out that my wife had been cheating on me for months, and my friend had known about it all along. He told me everything he knew, and I decided to take justice into my own hands. I got my revenge on her for cheating. In this video, I will tell you the whole story, and you will learn how I found out the truth about my wife, and how I decided to get revenge on her. Ruslan and Sophia had been married for 6 years. Sonia was a manicurist, and Ruslan worked for a small company as a landscape designer. A couple of years ago, they took an apartment on a mortgage, and were gradually fixing it up. The couple had been trying for over a year to have a child. Both were ready to take on the role of parents, but nothing worked. Even though they had already had some tests done, and everything was normal, they did not want to take any drastic steps. So they just kept hoping that someday they would finally get lucky. Ruslan had a good friend whose name was Andrew. The man, unlike his companion, was lonely and lived alone. He did not have much luck in relationships. At some point, he had already accepted this state of affairs and stopped busting his neck to get acquainted with anyone. He was comfortable enough as it was. They had met in high school and had been in touch ever since. As adults, they didn't see each other that often. But when they did meet, it was as if they hadn't been together all that time. One afternoon, Andrew was going about his business and decided to walk through the park. His head was occupied with the repairs he was making, so he hardly paid any attention to those who passed him by. Suddenly, he stumbled over some rock in the middle of the path, and it snapped him out of his heap of thoughts. He glanced around to see if anyone had noticed his fall, when suddenly, he spotted a familiar silhouette ahead. He stepped a little closer and recognized her. It was Sophia, his friend's wife. She was walking in the company of a man. "Sonia, hello," shouted Andrew, walking a little closer. The woman turned around. "Andrew, hello? I didn't expect to see you here." The man had already held out his hand to her companion to say hello.
André Kostia.
At that moment, the woman tensed a little. She bit her lip and then said with a laugh, "This is my brother. He came to town for the day, here to give us a tour. We're really in a bit of a hurry, sorry." Andrew replied that it was no big deal. He asked him to say hello to Ruslan, and then they said goodbye. He stared intently at Konstantine's face. Something tensed him in the whole situation. It was either Sanja's reaction or her hurry. For a second, he even thought there was far from a kinship between these two. But the telephone call from a client distracted him, pushing the man's doubts away. In the flow of events and working moments, Andrew had completely forgotten about the situation in the park. He was not even surprised at the absence of a call from Ruslan. Usually, if he said hello to him through his acquaintances, he considered it his duty to call and meet him. But the friend did not show up until a few months later. One evening, Ruslan dialed his comrade and informed him in a joyful voice that soon he would finally become a father. You know, nothing much had happened before that. And here is the real news, and I decided to share it with you. Andrew sincerely congratulated his friend. He knew how long he and his wife had come to this. At the end of the year, in the winter, Ruslan even invited him to the maternity hospital to be discharged. Afterward, they sat together for a while and celebrated. Later, there was a lull. The couple fully immersed themselves in taking care of the baby. The world began to revolve around him. From time to time, they would write to each other. But for the most part, Ruslan was immersed in his work to provide his family with everything they needed. They had not seen each other for over a year. And one day on his day off, Andrew was passing through the neighborhood where his comrade lived. He had to pick up an order at the pickup point, which was in their house. And by happy coincidence, he met Ruslan in the street. He was strolling along with the stroller. André shouted at him, and he gestured for him to keep his voice down. The child dozed off. It turned out that his wife had sent him for a walk with his son and wanted to relax and unwind. The friends were talking. Andrew looked at the little boy and asked if he could tell what the child looked like. He looked more like his mother. He didn't take anything from me as if he didn't like it, apparently. He made a joke. My friend did not appreciate the joke. He suddenly remembered seeing his wife with some stranger whom she introduced as her brother. And this was not long before the news of the pregnancy. "I'm sorry, don't take this the wrong way, but have you ever considered that the baby might not be yours?" André asked seriously. Ruslan looked at him like he was crazy. He laughed and asked why he suddenly thought so. A friend snapped and decided to tell him that he had seen his wife with someone in the park at the time. After that, Ruslan was not so cheerful anymore. "Well, hello. She certainly didn't tell me from you. She didn't say that she saw you at all. And your brother? Kostya, you say? She doesn't have any brothers, and I don't remember any cousins." he said thoughtfully. And she certainly did not tell me that any of her relatives visited her at that time. This news shook Ruslan. He still felt euphoric that he finally had his heir. Besides, he had always found that he and his wife had a good relationship, but now doubts about his wife's faithfulness had settled in his mind. Yes, and at a time when they were ready to give up, and she suddenly became pregnant. At that time, Ruslan thought it was a miracle, but now everything was covered with a shroud of doubt. He thanked his friend for telling him about the incident, even though it was so much later. That night, he had waited for his wife's return more anxiously than ever before. He knew there was a serious talk to be had. As he waited for her, sitting in complete silence in the kitchen, he went over in his head all the suspicious things that he might in the past have simply turned a blind eye to. When their next attempt to have a baby failed, he felt at one point as if his wife had grown cold to the idea altogether. She didn't say she changed her mind, but you could feel it in the look on her face. Then there was even some coldness between them. But Ruslan put it down to hormonal background. The man decided to call his mother-in-law and find out from the source whether there was a certain Constantine among his wife's brothers after all. He veiled this strange question by saying that a certain man came to their house when Sonia was away and introduced himself as her brother. Our fears had already been confirmed. There was no such man among her cousins, or even third cousins. When the man hung up, Sonia had just returned home. After she had checked on the baby, the man decided to start a conversation. He began from afar, mentioning Castilla, who had recently dropped in on her as if to visit. Ruslan decided not to specify the degree of their relationship and just watched her reaction. Sonia did not make eye contact. She constantly looked away. When the man's name came up, it was as if she tensed up. But she tried not to show it. "Do you know him, dear?" her husband asked in a calm tone. "Yes, he's a former colleague." "And what did he want?" pronounced Sonia. "He wanted to see his child." The husband decided to go along with the provocation. Sonia went dramatically pale and didn't blink for a couple of seconds. She opened and closed her mouth like a fish on dry land. Ruslan decided to squeeze her. "So he's right, isn't he? You didn't cheat with him, did you? It seems time to do a paternity test." His words thundered to his wife. Then she tried to pull herself together. "I've been agonizing for hours to give you a son, and you're doing this to me," she howled. "Well, if it really is my baby, what do you have to worry about?" her husband said calmly. The expression on the woman's face was as if she were ready to burst with anger. Forgetting about the sleeping baby, she started yelling at her husband for trying to avoid responsibility for the baby like a coward. She threatened that now she would go to her mother and Ruslan would never see her again. Then she tearfully began packing her belongings. The expertise made it clear that the baby was not Ruslan after all. After that, he and Sonia scandalously divorced. The man was both angry and depressed by this news. He had already managed to get used to the role of the father, attached to this little lump of happiness. All this time, Andra had been by Ruslan's side and supported him in this difficult period. Sonia went to her parents. By then, she had long been out of touch with her lover. But now, feeling vulnerable, she tried to resume communication with him. But Castilla himself was not eager to do so. He already had his own family and he did not care about Sonia. So, in an attempt to deceive her husband, the woman lost her own game. Such is the story. Share in the comments what you think about this situation and the behavior of the characters. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more jaw-dropping stories.